Never interrupt someone while they are spending thousands of dollars making your evidence impossible to deny. The sharp crack of a pneumatic nail gun echoed across the quiet neighborhood just after sunrise, followed by the steady whine of a circular saw cutting through freshly milled cedar. I stood on my back porch holding a mug of black coffee, while the cool summer air carried the unmistakable scent of new lumber, damp grass, and freshly poured concrete drifting across the property line. Morning sunlight reflected off stacks of composite decking boards waiting beside a brand-new pergola frame, and every few seconds another crew member shouted measurements before driving more fasteners into place. My neighbor, Michael Turner, walked confidently between the contractors with a folded set of construction plans tucked beneath one arm, occasionally pointing toward the expanding deck with the satisfied smile of someone watching a dream become reality. From where I stood, I could already see what nobody else seemed to notice. The outer support posts crossed directly over the invisible property line and continued several feet onto my land. I did not wave. I did not argue. I did not even step across the fence to interrupt the work. Instead, I quietly took another sip of coffee while listening to the rhythmic sound of hammers, saw blades, and air compressors blending with birds singing from the old maple trees surrounding both backyards. Most people assumed I was simply being polite. The truth was much simpler. I already knew exactly where every property corner sat because I had walked those boundaries more times than I could count. Years before becoming a property investor, I worked as a licensed land surveyor, and old habits never disappear. Every iron survey monument, every recorded plat, every legal description, and every county benchmark had become second nature long before Michael ever moved into the neighborhood. A few weeks earlier, I had watched the contractors unload their equipment and casually stretch temporary layout strings across both yards. One orange string crossed directly over an iron survey pin hidden beneath a thin layer of grass. I almost smiled when I saw it because that single pin had remained in the ground longer than either of our houses had existed. My father showed it to me when I was a teenager and told me something I never forgot. He said fences can move, gardens can grow, and neighbors can guess, but steel survey monuments never develop opinions. They simply wait for someone willing to uncover them. Michael never uncovered that one. Instead, he trusted rough measurements taken from an old wooden fence that had been installed decades after the subdivision was built. Every new footing they poured moved the project farther onto my property, and every expensive improvement made the mistake more difficult to correct. Composite decking arrived by the truckload. Decorative railings followed. Stone veneer wrapped around support columns. Electricians installed recessed lighting beneath stair treads, while landscapers prepared flower beds surrounding the expanding structure. Several neighbors gathered along the sidewalk admiring what they proudly called the nicest backyard renovation in the community. Even members of the homeowners association stopped by to compliment the design, praising Michael for increasing neighborhood property values. He thanked them with obvious pride, completely unaware that the most important line on the entire project existed only on a certified survey folded neatly inside a yellow document folder resting in my office. I had looked at that survey again the night before, tracing every bearing and distance exactly as recorded by the county decades earlier. Then I closed the folder, placed it back inside the filing cabinet, and returned to the porch before sunrise. Some mistakes become smaller when you stop them early. Others become undeniable only after they are finished. By the second week, the deck had already become the most talked about project on our street. Every morning another delivery truck arrived carrying premium composite boards, cedar trim, decorative stone, stainless steel hardware, and carefully wrapped lighting fixtures. The neighborhood filled with the scent of freshly cut lumber mixed with sawdust warming beneath the summer sun while compressors hissed, nail guns cracked, and circular saws hummed from dawn until late afternoon. I continued my usual routine without changing a thing. After breakfast, I walked the perimeter of my backyard carrying nothing more than a notebook and a cup of coffee, stopping occasionally beside old maple trees that had shaded this property since long before the subdivision existed. Buried beneath a few inches of grass near the corner of the expanding construction site rested the same iron survey monument my father had shown me more than 30 years earlier. I brushed away a little dirt with the toe of my boot until the weathered metal cap became visible again. The engraved survey number remained perfectly clear despite decades beneath the soil. Seeing it there always reminded me of something my father repeated every time we walked a property boundary together. He believed the ground never forgets where it begins and where it ends, even when people do. Before becoming a property investor, I spent years working as a licensed land surveyor, and those lessons shaped the way I looked at every piece of land. While most people saw fences, flower beds, or driveways, I automatically noticed bearings, monuments, recorded plats, easements, and legal descriptions. That habit made it impossible for me to ignore what the construction crew had unknowingly built. Every new footing, every support post, and every section of framing extended farther across the recorded boundary. I never blamed the workers because they simply followed the layout provided to them. One afternoon, the project foreman smiled and asked whether I liked the design. I complimented the craftsmanship because it truly was impressive. He proudly explained that the completed project would include a covered pergola, an outdoor kitchen, built-in seating, recessed lighting, custom railings, and premium composite decking that could last for decades with very little maintenance. Listening to him estimate the total investment at nearly $40,000 only strengthened my decision to remain patient. Later that evening, I unlocked the cedar cabinet inside my home office and removed the yellow survey folder from the top shelf. Inside rested the certified boundary survey prepared several years earlier after I purchased the property. Folded beside it were county plats, recorded deeds, monument recovery notes, GPS coordinate reports, and photographs documenting every iron pin before landscaping had covered them with grass. I spread everything across my desk beneath the warm light of an antique brass lamp and carefully compared the measurements once more. Nothing had changed. The legal boundary remained exactly where it had always been. Outside my office window, I could hear laughter drifting across the yards as Michael proudly gave another neighbor a tour of the partially completed deck. The setting sun reflected across fresh cedar posts, making the entire structure glow with a warm golden color that almost distracted from the quiet truth resting inside the folder before me. I closed every document, returned the survey to its envelope, and placed it back inside the cabinet. Some people believe patience means doing nothing. My father taught me that patience means knowing exactly when the evidence has become complete enough that it no longer needs an argument. Edit construction moved quickly once the foundation inspections were finished, and before long the entire backyard had begun looking more like the cover of a luxury home magazine than an ordinary neighborhood project. Massive cedar support beams stretched across carefully poured concrete footings, while premium composite decking covered the expanding platform one precise board at a time. Carpenters measured every corner twice before fastening each section into place. Electricians installed low-voltage lighting beneath the stair treads, and stonemasons wrapped the support columns with decorative veneer that perfectly matched the exterior of Michael's house. Every afternoon, the scent of fresh cedar drifted through the neighborhood as sunlight reflected across polished hardware and newly installed railings. Even I had to admit the craftsmanship was outstanding. The contractors clearly took pride in their work, and none of them had any reason to suspect they were building across a legal property line that had remained unchanged for decades. Michael's excitement grew with every passing day. He often stood near the edge of the project with folded arms, smiling while neighbors stopped to admire the transformation. Several homeowners commented that the deck looked like something from a high-end custom home, and members of the Homeowners Association praised the improvement during casual conversations along the sidewalk. One board member even joked that Michael deserved a neighborhood beautification award once the project was complete. I simply smiled, congratulated the workers. The final piece of composite decking was secured on a bright Saturday afternoon, and within hours Michael transformed his backyard into the center of the neighborhood. Soft string lights glowed beneath the new pergola, while polished stainless steel railings reflected the warm evening sun. The outdoor kitchen stood ready beside a stone fire feature. Comfortable furniture surrounded freshly planted flower beds, and the entire structure looked like something from an expensive home design magazine. Music drifted gently across the yards as neighbors arrived carrying covered dishes, desserts, and folding chairs. The smell of grilled steaks, cedar smoke, and fresh-cut grass blended together beneath a cloudless summer sky while children laughed nearby and adults admired what many called the finest backyard improvement our subdivision had ever seen. Several members of the homeowners association congratulated Michael, complimenting both the craftsmanship and the investment he had made in the neighborhood. Standing on my own patio with another cup of coffee, I quietly watched the celebration unfold exactly as I expected. There was no frustration in me, only patience. Every completed railing, every decorative light, every custom-built bench, and every carefully installed board had brought the project to the point where no misunderstanding remained. The deck was no longer a construction site. It had become a permanent structure, and permanent structures leave permanent evidence. As twilight settled across the neighborhood, Michael noticed me standing near the fence and smiled broadly before waving me over. "Daniel," he called, "you have to come see this." It turned out even better than I imagined. I walked across the lawn at an unhurried pace, taking in every detail of the finished work. The craftsmanship truly was exceptional. The decking boards lined up perfectly, the joints were precise, the pergola cast beautiful geometric shadows across the surface, and the landscaping framed the entire space with remarkable care. I complimented the contractors sincerely because quality workmanship deserves respect regardless of the circumstances surrounding it. Michael thanked me and proudly explained how long he had planned the project, describing the upgraded lighting system, hidden drainage, reinforced framing, premium composite materials, and custom finishes. Several neighbors listened with admiration while homeowners association board members nodded approvingly. One of them even joked that the deck should become the example for future neighborhood improvement projects. I smiled politely, reached into the leather portfolio I had carried beneath my arm, and removed a large yellow document envelope that had remained unopened throughout the evening. The conversation around us slowly faded as I placed the envelope gently on the outdoor dining table between the serving dishes and decorative lanterns. Michael looked down with a puzzled expression before asking what it was. "A certified boundary survey," I answered calmly, "along with the recorded county plat, monument recovery report, and legal property description." Curious neighbors leaned closer while Michael carefully opened the envelope. The first page displayed a detailed survey map marked with bearings, distances, iron survey monuments, and the exact outline of the newly completed deck. Bright red shading extended several feet beyond the recorded property line and directly beneath a significant portion of the structure everyone had spent the evening admiring. Michael studied the drawing without speaking. One homeowners association board member quietly asked whether the highlighted area represented my property. I nodded once. The evening breeze carried the scent of cedar across the now silent gathering while decorative lights reflected softly against the polished deck boards. Nobody argued. Nobody laughed. Every eye remained fixed on the survey lying peacefully across the table because, unlike opinions, measurements have no reason to raise their voices. For several long seconds, nobody around the table said a single word. The quiet became almost as noticeable as the music that had faded into the background. Michael continued staring at the certified survey, while one homeowners association board member carefully picked up the second page containing the recorded county plat. Another neighbor leaned closer to examine the highlighted boundary lines, tracing the measurements with one finger before looking toward the edge of the deck, where the outer support posts disappeared into the evening shadows. Finally, Michael cleared his throat and forced a small laugh that sounded far less confident than anything he had said earlier that night. He insisted there had to be some mistake because his contractor measured everything from the existing fence. I calmly nodded because I had expected exactly that response. "The fence is not the legal property line," I explained. "It never has been." I opened the portfolio again and removed several dated photographs showing the original iron survey monuments before landscaping had covered portions of them with grass over the years. Beside those photographs rested copies of the monument recovery report prepared during my certified boundary survey, complete with professional signatures, county references, GPS coordinates, and measurement tables. One of the homeowners association board members quietly asked whether the metal survey marker was still in the ground. I answered that it remained exactly where it had been placed decades earlier. Curiosity quickly replaced celebration. Several neighbors walked with me toward the corner of the yard where I knelt beside the old maple tree and gently brushed away a thin layer of soil with my hand. Within moments, the weathered steel survey monument appeared exactly where the survey indicated it should be. Its identification number matched the documentation resting inside the yellow envelope. Nobody spoke as everyone looked from the exposed monument back toward the beautifully finished deck. The distance between the marker and the nearest support column suddenly felt much shorter than anyone remembered. Michael stood silently for a moment before saying that perhaps the survey should be checked again. I agreed immediately because accuracy benefits everyone. The following Monday morning, I contacted the same licensed surveying firm that had completed my certified boundary survey several years earlier and requested an independent monument verification. 2 days later, a field crew arrived carrying total stations, GPS receivers, tripods, prism poles, data collectors, and brightly colored survey flags. Their professional routine unfolded with calm precision. They recovered multiple monuments throughout the subdivision, verified county control points, compared bearings against the recorded plat, and measured every visible corner of the completed deck. Michael watched the process from his driveway while several neighbors quietly gathered along the sidewalk. Nobody interrupted the crew because experienced surveyors rarely need opinions while collecting measurements. Late that afternoon, the supervising surveyor invited both of us to review the preliminary findings beside the instrument truck. He unfolded a fresh field sketch, pointed toward the recovered monuments, and calmly confirmed that the certified boundary survey had been accurate from the beginning. According to the verified measurements, several structural support posts, portions of the decking surface, decorative landscaping, and part of the finished stairway extended across the recorded property line onto my land. The evening breeze carried the familiar scent of fresh cedar through the neighborhood once again, but now every expensive board resting beyond that invisible line represented something entirely different. It no longer symbolized a successful backyard renovation. It had become documented evidence supported by measurements that neither emotion nor confidence could move even a single inch. The survey crew packed their equipment just before sunset, leaving behind a row of brightly colored survey flags marking the verified property line with quiet precision. Those small flags fluttered gently in the evening breeze while neighbors slowed their evening walks to study something they had never paid much attention to before. The invisible line had suddenly become impossible to ignore. Michael remained standing near the edge of the deck with both hands resting on the polished cedar railing, looking back and forth between the survey markers and the completed structure as though hoping one of them would somehow move. They never did. The following morning, his contractor returned to the property carrying rolled construction plans, a tape measure, and a notebook filled with field notes from the original layout. I greeted him politely as he walked toward the exposed iron survey monument. After comparing his measurements against the certified survey, he quietly admitted that his crew had been instructed to reference the existing fence instead of requesting an official boundary verification before construction began. He explained that fences are often assumed to follow property lines, but assumptions and legal boundaries are rarely the same thing. His honesty earned my respect because admitting a mistake requires far more character than pretending one never happened. Later that afternoon, Michael asked whether we could sit down and discuss possible solutions before anyone involved attorneys or county officials. We met beneath the shade of the old maple tree separating our backyards, while the warm scent of cedar drifted across the freshly completed deck. I brought the certified survey, the recorded plat, the monument recovery report, and copies of the county property descriptions. Michael arrived carrying construction invoices, permit paperwork, contractor agreements, and engineering drawings approved for the project. We spread every document across the outdoor table and carefully reviewed them page by page. The building permit itself had been issued correctly because the county relied upon the information submitted by the property owner. The contractor had completed quality work according to the approved plans. The materials were exactly as specified. The craftsmanship remained excellent. The problem had never been how the deck was built. The problem was where it had been built. Michael quietly admitted he had never ordered an independent boundary survey because he believed the fence accurately represented the property line. I understood why he thought that, but property law does not recognize assumptions simply because they appear reasonable. Recorded monuments, certified surveys, and legal descriptions determine ownership, not landscaping installed years later by previous homeowners. Before we finished our conversation, I suggested bringing in a real estate attorney experienced with boundary disputes, so both of us could understand every available legal option before making any decisions. Michael agreed immediately. 2 days later, our attorneys met with us alongside the licensed surveyor who had verified the monuments. They reviewed every document, every measurement, every county record, and every permit without unnecessary drama. After several hours, the attorney representing Michael leaned back in his chair and calmly explained that the verified survey left very little room for legal disagreement. The completed deck clearly extended onto my recorded property. The room became unusually quiet as everyone absorbed the same conclusion supported by every certified document on the table. For the first time since construction began, nobody discussed opinions, fences, or estimates. The only language that mattered now was the language written by measurements that had existed long before any of our houses were ever built. The mediation session took place the following week inside a quiet conference room overlooking the county courthouse lawn. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, reflecting across polished wood tables covered with neatly organized binders, certified surveys, engineering reports, title documents, contractor invoices, and copies of the recorded subdivision plat. Nobody raised a voice because there was no need. Every important fact already existed on paper. Michael sat beside his attorney with a thoughtful expression that looked very different from the confidence he carried only a few weeks earlier. Across the table, I placed the same yellow survey envelope that had remained beside me since construction began. The licensed surveyor attended the meeting as an independent professional, carefully explaining how each monument had been recovered, how every measurement had been verified twice, and how the final drawing accurately represented the recorded property boundaries filed with the county decades earlier. The title company representative reviewed the original legal descriptions attached to both properties and confirmed that the ownership records matched the certified survey without conflict. An official from the building department explained that the construction permit itself remained valid because it had been issued based upon the information submitted during the application process. But a permit could never transfer ownership of land belonging to another property owner. That statement changed the atmosphere inside the room. The discussion no longer focused on whether the deck had been built beautifully. Everyone already agreed that it had. Instead, the conversation centered on the legal location of the completed structure. Michael quietly admitted that he had relied entirely upon the existing fence and never questioned whether it accurately represented the recorded boundary. His contractor confirmed that no independent boundary verification had been requested before excavation began. The Homeowners Association representative who attended as an observer acknowledged that several neighbors had assumed the fence represented the correct property line as well. Listening to everyone describe how the misunderstanding developed reminded me why documented records matter so much. Honest assumptions can still produce expensive mistakes when they replace verified information. After several hours of reviewing every available option, the attorneys outlined the practical solutions supported by property law. Purchasing the affected portion of my land was discussed briefly, but the existing lot configuration, recorded setback requirements, and subdivision restrictions made that option impractical. A permanent encroachment agreement was considered next, yet it would create future title complications for both properties and potentially affect future buyers. Eventually, every professional in the room reached the same conclusion. The portion of the deck extending across the recorded boundary would need to be removed and reconstructed entirely within Michael's property lines. Nobody celebrated that recommendation because everyone understood the financial consequences involved. Even so, the solution restored the legal boundary exactly as it had always existed while protecting both property titles from future disputes. As the meeting concluded, Michael slowly closed his binder, looked across the table, and quietly said that he wished he had ordered a certified survey before the first shovel ever touched the ground. I nodded with complete sincerity because I believed him. Outside the courthouse, the warm afternoon breeze carried the familiar scent of freshly cut grass through the town square. Standing beside my truck with the yellow survey folder beneath my arm, I realized the smallest document I owned had quietly become the strongest structure in the entire story, holding together every fact that patience had allowed the truth to reveal. Work began early the following Monday under circumstances nobody would have imagined only a month earlier. Instead of construction trucks delivering new materials, They now arrived to carefully remove the portions of the completed deck that extended beyond the recorded property line. The same skilled craftsmen who had assembled every beam with remarkable precision now worked just as carefully in reverse, labeling components, removing railings section by section, and protecting every reusable board from unnecessary damage. The steady sound of impact drivers replacing nail guns echoed through the neighborhood, while stacks of premium composite decking gradually disappeared from the disputed area. Fresh cedar once again filled the morning air, but this time the familiar scent carried a very different meaning. It no longer represented expansion. It represented correction. Michael stood quietly beside the construction supervisor, reviewing the revised engineering drawings prepared after the certified survey established the lawful boundary beyond any remaining question. The updated plans shifted the entire footprint of the deck completely inside his recorded property while preserving as much of the original design as possible. Watching him speak respectfully with the crew reminded me how much had changed since the first morning construction began. Confidence had given way to careful planning, and assumptions had been replaced by measurements verified before every stake entered the ground. Several neighbors gathered along the sidewalk each afternoon, not to watch an argument, but to observe experienced professionals rebuilding the project according to the certified survey. Many admitted they had never realized how important licensed boundary verification could become until they witnessed the entire process unfold in front of their own homes. One homeowner even scheduled a survey for his own property before beginning a future landscaping project, explaining that a few $100s spent on certainty seemed insignificant compared with correcting an expensive mistake after construction. Hearing that quietly reinforced everything my father had taught me years earlier. Accurate information almost always costs less than confident assumptions. As reconstruction continued, the licensed surveyor returned several times to verify foundation locations before new support posts were installed. Bright survey flags marked every critical corner while GPS equipment and total stations confirmed each measurement before concrete was poured. Nobody complained about the extra time because everyone now understood that precision at the beginning prevents regret at the end. By the second week, the revised structure had begun taking shape entirely within Michael's property. Although slightly smaller than the original design, it remained beautiful, functional, and professionally constructed. More importantly, every beam, every footing, every stair, and every railing now respected the legal boundary exactly as recorded by the county decades earlier. One afternoon, Michael walked across the lawn carrying 2 cups of coffee and handed one to me while both of us quietly looked toward the nearly completed reconstruction. He admitted that seeing the survey crew verify every measurement before construction resumed had taught him more about property ownership than years of living in the neighborhood ever had. I smiled because I understood exactly what he meant. Property lines remain invisible only until someone chooses to measure them correctly. As the last section crossing onto my land disappeared and fresh grass seed covered the restored portion of my yard, the old iron survey monument once again rested peacefully beneath the soil, marking the same legal boundary it had protected for generations. Nothing about the land itself had changed. The only thing that changed was that everyone finally understood where the truth had been standing all along. Several months have passed since the reconstruction was completed, yet every time I step into my backyard with a fresh cup of black coffee, my eyes still drift toward the old maple tree standing quietly beside the property line. Beneath a few inches of healthy grass, the same iron survey monument remains exactly where surveyors placed it decades ago, unchanged by fences, landscaping, expensive renovations, or confident assumptions. The restored section of my yard has blended naturally into the surrounding lawn, making it almost impossible for anyone new to the neighborhood to imagine that a major property dispute ever unfolded there. Michael's rebuilt deck now sits entirely within his own boundary, looking just as attractive as before, only this time every footing, support beam, stair, and railing rests exactly where the certified survey intended. The contractors completed the revised construction with the same remarkable craftsmanship they demonstrated from the very beginning, and the finished result serves as a reminder that quality work deserves an equally accurate foundation. Over time, our conversations gradually returned to ordinary neighborhood topics instead of legal documents and boundary measurements. We occasionally exchanged gardening advice, discussed home maintenance projects, and waved while collecting mail in the evenings. The tension disappeared because the uncertainty disappeared with it. Shortly after reconstruction ended, the Homeowners Association invited a licensed surveyor to speak during one of its community meetings about property boundaries, recorded plats, easements, and the importance of obtaining certified surveys before beginning major construction. Many homeowners attended, asking thoughtful questions about fences, retaining walls, driveways, patios, and landscaping projects. Watching neighbors leave that meeting carrying new respect for property records felt far more satisfying than winning any argument ever could. Sometimes the greatest result of a difficult situation is preventing someone else from repeating the same mistake. A few weeks later, I opened the familiar yellow survey envelope one final time inside my home office. The certified boundary survey, county plat, monument recovery report, legal descriptions, verification sketches, and attorney correspondence rested exactly where I had placed them throughout the entire process. I added one final document to the folder, a copy of the revised as-built drawing showing Michael's completed deck positioned entirely within his recorded property. Then I returned the envelope to the cedar filing cabinet where it would likely remain untouched for years. Looking through the office window toward the peaceful backyard, I thought again about the lesson my father shared beside that iron survey monument when I was young. He never taught me that property disputes are won by speaking louder than someone else. He taught me that land remembers the truth even when people forget it. Survey monuments do not argue. County records do not become emotional. Certified measurements never change simply because construction becomes expensive. Patience allowed every fact to reveal itself at exactly the right moment, and the yellow survey folder quietly carried the truth from the first morning construction began until the final board was rebuilt in its proper place. Whenever someone asks why I never stopped the project sooner, I simply smile because the answer has never changed. The most expensive board on that deck was never the first one they installed. It was the last one they had to move after the survey showed everyone exactly where the property line had been waiting all along.